It's 2 p.m. now. Let's make a start on the dot even. Let's make a start with our first My Ability webinar Economic Forum in 2025. Here you can already see the title. We are going to talk about employer branding today. We are going to talk about employer branding for success, inclusion, unlocking the best talent. As per usual, at the very beginning, there are some housekeeping bits of information and a few bits of information regarding My Ability Economic Forum. Now I'm also going to switch language. So as said, there is going to be simultaneous interpretation from German into English. You can access it via the menu bar. If you want to look into that, you can tune into the English channel and you will hear Hannes and Josephine. As per usual, we will also have live subtitling today. You can also switch that on individually. Again, access the menu bar, then select the button CC and the More option, and then you can also switch on the subtitles. You can also access different options for displaying the subtitles there. Then this webinar is also going to be recorded, but only the speakers and the host will be visible on the video. And afterwards, we will also provide the webinar with subtitles and with German and English audio. And after our webinar, we will also we will also provide you with a report with a few key takeaway messages. Now, I've already said a lot, but I would also like to introduce myself. I'm Jenny Zeller, and as you can see here, I am honored to host today's webinar. I am Business Network Manager, and I'm responsible for the B2B network for our economic forum. Now, I would also like to introduce myself in other terms. I have long brown hair, wearing earrings today and a golden necklace, and I wear a lipstick. Then I would also like to say a few things regarding our economic forum. What are we? What do we do? Now, we are from My Ability, which is a social business that is headquartered in Vienna and acts in the entire German-speaking area, but also on an international level. And it is our aim to make for a more accessible society with equal opportunities, especially for actors of the economy. We do that with different initiatives, for example, with audits of websites and buildings, but also by transferring and imparting knowledge to you, like we do today with our webinar. So the Economic Forum is a B2B network, the biggest B2B network, to be very precise, in the German-speaking area that works in the area of accessibility. Now let us make a start with the topic of today and the structure of today's webinar. Now this webinar consists of two different blocks. First, we're going to hear expert input. We are going to talk about employer branding as a comprehensive and holistic measure with the company Accenture. And then afterwards, we're going to hear about employer branding from the perspective of a company and a candidate. And after that, after the expert input, we will have another half an hour where we can start a Q&A session with all of the different experts in order to get more knowledge. We are going to use the Q&A session option provided by Zoom. You can access that down below in the menu bar again. We are going to give our best in order to answer your questions either here, or if we are unable to answer your questions here, two colleagues are going to answer them in the background. For example, Sebastian from My Ability again. And now let us make a leap forward to our experts, and we're going to introduce our experts today. Now, who are our experts? Who is going to share their insights into employer branding with us today? We're talking about Katharina Kalwert, Talent Brand Inclusion and Diversity Lead from Accenture for the German-speaking territory. Then Michael Zakal, Talent Manager, Talent Programs of My Ability. And then Katharina Kerschbaumer, Disability Recruiting Consultant, Business Development, again from My Ability. The three of them, they are going to introduce themselves in a inclusive manner as well afterwards. Then I would also like to introduce you to Vicky, who prepared a question for you now, which is something that we like to do with our audience in our webinars in order to see what the mood is like in the audience. So there are no right or wrong answers. I'm going to read the question, and then please just answer accordingly. Think of your current employer branding. What describes your organization best in terms of inclusion? Option 1. Inclusion hardly plays any role in our employer branding. 2. We have set first measures, but there is a lot of room for improvement. 3. The implementation works well, but there are a few blind spots. 4. Our employer branding is inclusive and reflects our corporate culture. Now, you should already be able to answer, and I can already see how you are answering right now. There is already one option with over 50% of replies, but let's wait for another few seconds to make sure that we can get the exact image. Very interesting to see over 160 replies right now. We're also glad to have received over 300 registrations for today. So there are many insights that we can access today. And I think we can close this question now and have a look at how you answered. Just give me 1 second. We've closed the question. Now let me read out loud the answers to you. 12% said inclusion hardly plays any role in our company. Then 24% said the implementation works well, but there are a few blind spots. 8% said our employer branding is inclusive and it reflects our corporate culture. And the best performing option with over 50% is we have set first measures, but there is a lot of room for improvement. And thank you for your replies. And the first and most important step is always to start. And starting can already mean just participating at such a webinar as today. And now we are going to give the floor to Katharina Kalwert. She's going to open her camera right now as well. Now, Katharina, what do you think of this first question and the result?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. I think it's so interesting. I think we have a lot of potential to talk about this in the Q&A portion of this meeting. First of all, I'm very happy to be here on this sunny day, which it is at least in Vienna, to start this afternoon with all of you. My name is Katharina Keilwert. As Jenny already said, I work for Accenture for the German-speaking countries in the area of talent brand inclusion and diversity lead. I have shoulder-length brown hair. I have short hair in front of my face. I have brown eyes. I have a yellow top, just like the sun, and I'm wearing a black blazer, and my background is blurry. You can maybe see that there are bookshelves. So to add on to the questions, because you were all very active already, I also would like to follow up with another question to start my presentation. So my first thoughts on employer branding. If you think about employer branding, what does that make you think of? What does that mean to you? So I'll give you 10, 15 seconds to think about that, to just post into the chat, what does that make you think of? What do you associate with the term employer branding? Because there's very many different perspectives on this, and how people define this term can also vary. I'm not going to give you any sort of solution or anything. We can talk about this later. Let's move on to the next slide. In employer branding, the goal is to be an attractive employer, and to create a brand that's authentic, that doesn't give any empty promises, and that also increases the attractiveness of the employer and also means that more people will apply to your company. So in terms of communication in employer branding, I want to reach my target audience depending on which area I'm in, whether I'm looking for people with or without a lot of experience. So I do want to talk to them, and I do want to also respect their needs. Their needs might change over the course of their lives, maybe at the beginning of their careers. Maybe they might be looking for a good financial situation, but over time this might change later. They might want more security rather than a high wage. So this is what it says here on the slide. Successful employer branding reflects a work reality that meets the needs of different career and life stages of the employers. You might have already noticed, I forgot to say in the beginning, my slides are in English, so don't be confused. The slides are in English, but I will be talking in German. If you look at the next slide, what you can see is what employer brand does. So what we do and live internally in our business and how we communicate it to the outside, that is our employer brand. So it's really the core of our employer branding work at Accenture is to strengthen the inclusive work that we do internally, and to strengthen this to then be able to let it shine outside. The goal is, of course, and I think everyone will agree, that we want to have a candidate or a talent journey, and create different touch points that can be accepted by everyone, where everyone feels included, and to be able to reach as many people as possible. And in terms of inclusion and diversity, I just need to make space for that and have my measures to make sure I can actually reach everyone, and to be inclusive and have a target group that's as large as possible and as accessible as possible. So, why is this important for us, and why do we at Accenture think about this a lot? You will learn on the next slide. It's very clear that diverse teams and have an inclusive working environment just lead to a better work environment, more innovative, and better products can be produced. And it's also better for employers. They will feel better, they will work better if they work in an inclusive environment. So, to have inclusive and diverse teams means your team are 6 times more likely to be innovative and agile. They are 2 times as likely to meet or even exceed financial targets, 7% more likely to stay with the organization, and the commitment in diverse teams is 18% higher. So, what you can see here on the right side of the slide as well is a commitment that we as Accenture have, which is we foster a culture and a workplace where all our people can feel a sense of belonging, are respected, and are empowered to do their best work. So, inclusion and respect, belonging, those are all values that are very important to us. So there is a candidate journey, which means from being a candidate and the first touch points where maybe you meet us on career fairs or something until you become an employer or an alumni, there's many different touch points on this journey where we can show inclusive behavior, where we can use inclusive language and accessibility. And of course, one might ask themselves, if you think about this a lot, or if you're starting to think about this, where do I start? There are so many touch points. Where do I actually get going? And which career phases? What I think is important, because it's an experience that I've made, is to take small steps. For example, start with the language and take small steps. So let's go away from the theoretical constructs. I want to take you on a little journey to show you how we do it in our business and how the internal parameters, how we look at them to then make external measures. So you might know this already. We'll look again at this slide, which says we want to strengthen the core, which means that internally we want to strengthen our business to then be able to let it shine outwards and also to be able to send authentic messages. I think that is very important in employer branding. It doesn't mean you can also put external accents from the beginning, but we'll be talking about this a bit more later. On this slide, what you can see is 5 different aspects in terms of internal actions for inclusion and diversity and things that we are trying to do. The first one is active leaders, which means that the topic of inclusion and diversity has to be on the agenda. You have to learn about this and share it with external partnerships or also identify ambassadors who can communicate this outwards. So it means leadership, commitment, and ambassadors who can then figure out what the next steps need to be. The topic is very important, is build belonging. In Accenture, for example, we have an allyship program, which means that employees who are committed to a topic, be it gender or LGBTQI+, or the topic of people with disabilities, they will commit to one of these topics and support this topic. They don't have to show work too hard, but they are committed to support however they can in this area. And Accenture, our network is over 150,000 employees. The Ally network has over 150,000 employees, and it just shows how many people are committed, and we try to keep increasing this to make it an important part of our culture. Then it's also important to diversify talent and make it visible in our business. So, for example, we participate in the Pride Parade and the International Day for People with Disabilities. So, with the human resource groups, we try to create this belonging within the teams and the visibility as well to also show this towards the outside. So we're trying to diversify our talent and also to enable 360% value, which means that we are creating value. We saw on a previous slide that diverse teams just work better, are more innovative, more creative, which means for us at Accenture. They also support us and our customers to drive innovation and to create change. So that is the value that we create on this level. And this exists for every single business to see what this value is. Then partner for progress means that we have partnerships and mentorships, as we have the partnerships of My Ability, which helps learn from each other and talk to each other and increase expertise. If we look at inclusion and diversity in the area of employer branding, um, we can see the strategies or that you can picture kind of like a tunnel. At the top in the beginning, you want to be very visible and to reach as big as possible of a target group, and towards the ending, it gets smaller, so kind of like a funnel. Um, so in the beginning, we try to increase awareness and positioning in all areas, so not to look at it as a standalone. So that means anyone who has an IND role, and these can be experts, it means that you really have to understand these things and also do them, be it accessibility and presentations, your language. All these things are so important to do for yourselves. And I can say this for me personally as well. In the beginning you might miss some things, and but step by step you learn how to be more inclusive, and the more people in a team actually um, try to learn more about this, the more you can also learn from each other and become better at the whole thing. In terms of consideration, it's a lot about when people are thinking who they want to work for. And we are considering who wants to work for us, so who might be interested, who's looking at our company profile a bit more closely. So it's important to make our values visible that we hold internally. So for this, we need ambassadors, and to also include them into our processes and develop and challenge ideas together, because everyone has different experiences that they bring from their past. So it's important to actually work closely together with these people, for example, with people with disabilities, um, to talk with them and have them as ambassadors and really go speak to them directly. I can give an example about an event that we had where we built a stage, and then we also had a ramp for a colleague who is a wheelchair user. And of course, I don't know how it works to go up a ramp in a wheelchair, and what we need to consider when we do it about how long or how steep it can be. So, of course, someone who uses a wheelchair themselves can help me the best. So I can gain experience. I can create an experience that's good for everyone. I need to talk to someone else about it. This is the next point as well, leading experiences. Um, Employer branding is a lot about experiences. The more people we include into preparations, or the more we try things that might not be perfect in the beginning, but they will stick around if it really is a journey that we really put thoughts into and that is accessible. The topic of ambassadors I already mentioned, be it on social media or in internal channels that we have, people that carry our message outside. So, programs and cooperations, partnerships, use synergies. Like, for example, at Accenture, we've been working with My Ability for a long time, and we have the talent program in terms of branding and recruiting as well to take the next step. And also to use the expertise of the team to just help ourselves keep moving and keep developing. Um, So I'm nearly done. This is the second to last slide. This one is called step by step actions. It means to try things, to show courage, to work together with HR, have authentic communication, make values visible. Those are a few points that I just wanted to tell you. Of course, employer branding can never stand alone. So it's important to talk about employee research group, internal communication, and HR need to work together very closely to improve processes. Um, and last but not least, what I think is also one more very important point on my last slide. For me, it's very important to be connected in a network, to share experiences and hear about other experience. So I'm very happy to be here. Of course, was only able to give you a short input, but it was a good opportunity in to make our network grow and to give you some ideas about more things we could talk about. So I'd like to say, let's stay connected. Let's use this as a point of beginning where we can stay connected and um, create a better journey for candidates and to make it more inclusive and more accessible as well. So thanks a lot. So I can now pass back to Jenny, who has already turned on her camera. Thank you, Katerina, for all these interesting messages. You said employer branding lives from experiences, and I think that really is the truth. So I'd also like to take questions from the Q&A tools. Please use the tool so we have all the questions in the same point. You can find it down there in the menu bar where it says Q&A or F&A, depending on the language you have set. There are questions that can be answered really quickly. I'll read them out. What do your active leaders do at Accenture? How do they show their commitment and allyship? So the way we work internally is that we work a lot with the employee research group. So that means they have different topics of diversity like gender for LGBTQI+, for people with disabilities, cultural topics. So we have a very large range and diverse range. So we have sponsorships as well that are visible when we have events that we can show. So we actively include these also when we plan our years and our activities and our events. So we try to always be active to give our team a good leadership and to show them all the aspects that are important. I hope I answered the question well. That was so interesting. Thank you. It's so interesting about the employer research groups because your first question you said employer branding means intersectionality. And I think that's a really good answer if you even think about LGBTQI plus and other topics. So there's another question that I want to talk about is how much time are your employees allowed to work on a belonging engagement? Do you have a number for this? I'm sorry, I don't have an actual number there because I'm from employer branding. So my focus is more on the external communication. Um, but if you want, I can check and maybe let you know later or just message me on LinkedIn or anywhere if you have any more questions where maybe I don't have an answer yet. So that's all right. We received more questions as well about statistics. Um, which I think we can ask you afterwards as well, when you will have had the possibility to ask these things and find out more about these things. So thank you for your input, Katarina. We did really well in terms of time management. I'm very proud. So let's go to our next two experts.
So we are going to hear from Katrin Kerschbaumer and Michael Zakal. They are going to open a conversation now on the topic of the success factor of employer branding. Now, please, the two of you, switch on your camera and your microphone, obviously. And then I'm going to pin your video to make sure that everyone can see you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and then you should be visible for everybody. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. From our part, we are happy to be part of this webinar today. Thank you so much to the team of the forum for the invite. My name is Katrin Kerschbaumer. You can also call me Tina if you want. I have blonde hair. I have brown glasses, a white shirt, and then I'm also wearing a light blue blazer. I am disability recruiting consultant, so I am responsible for the job platform and the talent program of My Ability. Hi, from my part, my name is Michael Zakal. Happy to be here with you. Then I should also describe myself. I have blonde hair, blue eyes, I'm wearing brown glasses, and I'm wearing a jacket. Third, I'm from the talent program, but I have a background in musical, actually. But employer branding and personnel development, that has been a big passion of mine. I've been working in the area of inclusion for 3 years now, in coaching, training for people with disabilities. And today I would like to give you an insight into topics, uncertainties, concerns, and solutions that we work on when working with people with disabilities, when they would like to apply with companies. Together with Tine, we worked on a few key messages, and they are going to really add to the presentation that we just had previously. Katharina already imparted a lot of knowledge to everybody, so she did a good ramp up to our conversation. But we thought about the question, what would we like it to tell all of the representatives of different companies? What would we like it to tell them if they want to strengthen their employer brand for people with disabilities, or perhaps even give them an insight into how to turn their employer brand in an inclusive one? And the first point in that regard that we would like to tell you, the first message is don't be afraid, just dare. Now, unfortunately, the interpreter cannot hear. I think the connection is lost. Obviously, there are some problems sometimes, but if you do engage in these employer branding measures, you can also dare to just do, and then just accept there will be some errors along the way. So it's best to do something than not doing anything at all. So don't be afraid of mistakes, because this scare, this fear of making mistakes, that is the biggest challenge and the biggest thing that limits inclusivity. That's true, because if you have a look at inclusivity from different perspectives, you will see that there are so many options actually. And I also think that a dynamic system, we are going to develop something, a campaign, a project, an event. All of that is going to help you to receive information. If you have an open approach to people with disabilities, for example, if we want to open new possibilities in our recruiting, this is going to get you the information that is going to prepare you for the next steps. This is something that I see in coaching time and time again. The first impression, wow, I can be open here. I can say what I need, and then I can do the best work possible. And then sometimes the second stage is that someone tries to implement something and sees that there are errors that just happen. But don't be afraid of this stage, because we are working on that together. And if your background work already did a great job in order to coin your employer branding, then in case of errors, you can mitigate them more easily, because you have also to think of the fact that you do that together with us. So yes, it is important to just dare to make the first step, even if it's a baby step that you take. And then even if you make a baby step into the wrong direction, it's not that bad. It's always better to make a step at all, because then you can improve for the next steps that follow. Something that we forgot, because there is one precondition, that there is one prerequisite to make sure that our bits of advice work, and it's the fact that diversity and inclusion, equity and inclusion, should be anchored into your company cultures, into your company values. It has to be an important topic for your company in order to then also share that with the external world. But I do think, and I do assume, that all of our listeners today, everyone in the audience today, already has a very good feeling about that, about diversity and inclusion. This has to be a key topic in your companies. It has to be part, perhaps, of your corporate values to make sure that such a project can be successful. And then it doesn't really matter whether you have a highly strategic approach to that, or if you engage in creative, intuitive projects. The most important thing is to make the first step, and then perhaps also the third and fourth follow-up step. And since we've already reach this topic at Saki, we should also say something else regarding that. So if we say that this is an important topic for us, and if we have already shared that to everyone internally, we then also have to express that to the external world. So if we say that equity and inclusion are part of our corporate values, we also have to show that to everyone outside of the company. This can be done on different levels with different options. You can do that on your own website to really dedicate an area to that, to topics. What are we, or who are we? What do we do? What do we want to achieve? And something else that you should always keep in the back of your mind is, and because that is something that most of the people strive to, these are values like being together, being part of something, contribute to something, being together with a team, with a community, achieving goals together with them, pursuing a vision, working for a value, and working on a value. These are things that you have to communicate to your employees in your company, but also to maybe future candidates, future employees. And this is something that is always something that resonates within all of the different groups. Yes, you just said something that was very important. Together, being together, starting this project and this process together. Because as a company, as a brand, I can understand that you already have a standing, you already have a certain image, and then you might have to adjust the course of your actions. But then in inclusion, that is something that is just a layer on top of everything that you have already done. And then from inside out, you can change a company quickly or over the course of time. But you can't just come up with one idea and then just magically implement it. No, you have to collaborate with your employees, with different supporters like My Ability, or with other people that you have interviews with, for example, that give you their insight on how they see the shape of your structure in future. That is an important element. Exactly. I, I think it is important to dedicate space to this topic on your website, but also in job platforms, on social media, and also when you place a job ad. And today, I even think it's not enough if you just have a cliche diversity statement that that you are looking for a new employer, and it doesn't matter whether or not they have disabilities or not. Yes, that is great. That is an important step because we all need that. But perhaps today this might not be sufficient. It shouldn't stop there because yes, diversity is something that everyone does, but then it's difficult to tell what it actually means to the different companies. So it has to be something that is individual, that is particular to your company. Then you, in the job ad, there are also phrases like, in case there are there are candidates with the same qualifications, I'm going to choose the one with disabilities. Yes, that is something that you can do, but the disability of a person shouldn't be the reason why you hire them in the first place. It's their qualifications that are important. So there are different possibilities that you have available that you can choose in order to portray what you stand for as a company. Then for example, you have the situation, you have a campaign for employer branding, you show to everybody that you would like to be inclusive, but then right before the first candidates file their application, there is something that you can do. The potential that already exists within your company. Katharina already mentioned this when she talked about the different leads. Something that I saw in coaching is that there are people who would like to shape together with you, who would like to promote these values within the company. And then there are people who wouldn't like to do that. And both of these worlds, they can coexist to a certain extent. So there are certain campaigns where you, for example, say, please reach out to us, reach out to our company if you have disabilities, if you have chronic disease, if you have different requirements to your ideal workspace, and you can elaborate different when we will adapt. But then in reality, we sometimes see that 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 nothing that this strategy isn't that effective because the candidates, they want to reach out to a company when they want to reach out to them, not when they are asked to reach out. So you have to establish a a room, you have to establish an environment that just shows in general we are open to everything, and it is your decision when you file your application. So that is something that you need to think of. So you have to immediately use the potential within your company, and you can then also use that externally. For example, when thinking of best practices, something that I know from your part is that there are people who like to talk about their disabilities, and then there are people who don't like to do that. But if you have people who like to talk about their disabilities, you can put them to the foreground. You can show them on camera. You can also dedicate space to them on your website, for example. So you can reach out to these people that already exist and turn them into your employer brand, because as we all know, the people who are already part of the company, they are the best measure for your employer branding. Now, the German translation of employer branding would be something like a workers market, but then some of our people that we work with, they told us they rather see it as the employees branding, so not workers branding, but employees branding. But then also beware of the fact that you should not just always use the same person in a wheelchair on every photo that you as a company publish. That shouldn't be your strategy of choice either. Yes, exactly. Always make sure to to have diverse groups of people that you show, and always listen to all of the different people, because that can be very resourceful for you as well. And and if you wanted to reach out to people with disabilities, you can do so because they are the experts for their needs. So if you have people with disabilities in your company, always reach out to them and get their insight. Then something else that I would like to tell you is to always choose the correct external channels. For example, our job platform, that would be a means in order to strengthen the position of people with disabilities. But this can also be a cooperation with other companies or other service providers, with other consulting firms. For example, uniform contact offices in Germany or in Switzerland as they exist. Then also in Austria, there is a counterpart for that. So if you have these corporations, always show them to the world, and always make sure that everyone knows that. Now, something else that just comes to my mind. Could I see a heart? Could everyone just send us a heart who is already in our job platform? Can you see how many? This is our inclusion revolution. Let's put it that way. And these are these are my people. I'm thrilled to see that. So it is important to choose the right external partners, as Katarina already mentioned before. So don't do that alone, and don't feel lonely in that. This can be based on cooperation with others. Now we have one last bit of advice, and then we will give the floor to Jenny again. And this bit of advice is always make sure to be as accessible as possible. So be sure to think of that when it comes to your language, so to your communication, accessible website structures. That is important, because yes, you can say we are inclusive, but then you have people who cannot access the right information on your website. That doesn't go together. So you have to make sure that this is in harmony. So authenticity plays a big role too. So don't pretend to be anything that you are not. This is also something that I tell people in my coaching sessions. Be yourself. This is going to help you to be authentic, and then you you won't fall prey to people or companies who aren't as inclusive as you need them to be. And if you act like that, you will make progress over the course of time, and then check in again after 1 year. So be authentic. Yes, on our job platform, there are many companies. They use our description box, and in the description box they say, we know we haven't implemented our accessibility strategy to the full extent, and we don't know whether everything is perfect as it is, but please reach out to us, because we are going to adapt to your needs. And I do think that that is the correct option. Yes, there has to be a positive manner of dealing with mistakes. That is the best that you can do. And I think we can wrap up here, and then we will give the floor to Jenny again. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for listening. Are you still listening? Thank you to the both of you for this conversation of yours, and thank you for the different topics that you addressed. I'm just going to share my screen now.
Okay, I will switch to the right screen here because we brought another thing for you, especially because of what Zaki and Tini also said about best practices and potential examples. We brought a clip, one done by McDonald's, who are also a part of our economic forum. So I'd like to show it to you, and my colleague will also post the link in the chat so you can watch it yourself. It's only 30 seconds, and then we'll carry on. We're reading his thoughts. Wow, the crew knows sign language. It's like home. Home. Arriving at home. A new crew? New Mech family? Can I work for you? Yes. Music is turning up. Jobs for everyone. Apply now. Great. So the clip is also visible online. So um, if if you couldn't see the subtitles or the audio description, you can look at this online. So we will move on to the next slide. But first, another few pieces of information I'd like to give you. And Tini and Saki, can I ask you to come back real quick? Because we have a few questions for you that I'd like to ask you so that we can also talk about them. You were talking about internal and external things that you're doing, and a question that shows up is how can you be authentic without accidentally doing tokenism or cliches, as you said, Tini? So, not to always send the one person who uses a wheelchair always on all your pictures. So, how can we do this? Do you have a tip for this? Yeah, tokenism is something that happens all the time. It's something that can always happen. You can always do it with new possibilities, with new projects or campaigns or cooperations. What do you think, Tini? What I think is that in this whole thing of be authentic, it means you really show the people that actually work for you. And especially when it comes to the topic of disability, depending on what you think the source is, 70 to 90% of disabilities are not visible. So if I have a picture of a team of 50 people, then there will be people in there who have a disability, but they might just not be visible. So I don't always have to always put a visible disability into every single picture or person who has this disability. Of course, if people with visible disabilities want it and want to show it and want to talk about them, then our ambassadors, they can be our ambassadors and represent us. But in general, I should show myself the way I am, or even if that means on the first step showing that we're not quite done with becoming diverse and we've not finished working on our inclusion strategy. Just give your best and take more and more steps in the right direction. That's enough to show um, how you are authentically and be inclusive at the same time. I even think that even that is the crux of inclusion. If I, as a CEO or a general manager, or as someone who does an internship, I can play a role. I can be a part in creating our image. And that's what being authentic means. That's how I understood inclusion. And so you might say, this is how I understood inclusion and diversity. So this is how I'll live it. Um, and so you're adding more information into your business and you become more inclusive. You said that very nicely. We also have more questions on our Q&A tool. There are a few questions for the half an hour where we will talk about these questions. I'll give you another follow-up question before we finish the first block of the webinar, and those of you who want to leave can leave, of course. So something you already touched upon a little bit is that there might be a way how we internally do it with accessibility and how we show it externally, how it works together. So there were questions like, how do we communicate this? You say be honest and authentic. Can you maybe give us another piece of advice how to do that nicely and elegantly? Or where can we find sources if you're trying to do the first step on the journey of inclusion and you think, I want to communicate this, but how do I do this if haven't implemented all the measures? Do you have a tip on how to do this? Well, you can think about, is this about knowledge management or is it about first trials where you show how inclusion can be done in your business? Or is it about the different levels in your business, how they can be trained? I don't want to do an advertisement, but with the trainings we do, um, we also give you this sensing journey where people with disabilities tell you from about their perspective and how do they see the job market, what has worked, what hasn't worked. Um, and of course, that's something where you can already learn a lot about how would that be if they worked for us. To just give you one piece of advice. Yeah. I want to say something along the lines of what Katerina said. If a lot of people in my business are a part of this and they all carry this issue together, that's already a very important step. It's a good base. Um, and I believe as soon as I'm aware of things, or if I become aware of them for the first time about digital accessibility, I find out that that exists, then the first step has already happened. Because the question is, does this knowledge exist within our company? Do we need an external consultant? Do we need my ability, or who will help me with this? Maybe does my IT team already know everything that there is to know about digital accessibility? So the first step is always awareness, and then you can carry on, and a lot of things will then happen automatically just from talking to each other within the company. Also, you shouldn't forget inclusion can also happen accidentally. Maybe if people haven't even heard about it that much, but for themselves, acting the way that inclusion wants it, or they prepare a workspace for someone the way they need it. So sometimes it even happens on accident that we are inclusive, which is super interesting to see. Um, which means that you have a basis, something to build on. And because we already showed the McDonald's video, I have another really great example that I want to show. And this is a mug that we got from the KfW, which is a partner we have in Germany. They have these coffee mugs. It says destroying stereotypes for more diversity in KfW. And this is already pretty cool, but what's even cooler is on the back they have this in Braille as well. And sometimes there's like huge employer branding videos in sign language, and sometimes it's only something like a coffee mug that you like and that you like to look at, and you know, oh, I actually work for a really cool employer, because it's also nice to feel it. So you can actually read this braille here on the mug. Thanks a lot for adding here. As I said, we will move over to the interactive part, but first I'd like to finish the first block um, with a few pieces of information. As said before, there will be a report on this and an inclusive recording with subtitles in German and English. And we will also publish the webinar, which will also have subtitles. Should you have questions or want more information about employer branding, about my ability, about different possibilities and information you can get, you can find them on www.myability.org. And of course, we also have an email address and our social media. Also, us as Economic Forum. If you want to reach us, ask us at forum@myability.org. And we're also on LinkedIn and Instagram. On LinkedIn, we're called My Ability Social Enterprise, and on Instagram, it says Karriere, My Ability, Jobs. So we'll be happy to hear from you and interact with you more. So now, with a few thoughts like be authentic, be accessible, don't be afraid, and employer branding lives from experiences. Take your first step, as has been said at the beginning, with 56% of you saying you already took the first step. Now, I'd like to say goodbye for those of you who have to leave at 3 o'clock. Those of you who want to stay, feel free, feel welcome. So we will talk more with our experts about the questions in the Q&A tool. So I will stop sharing my screen and would like to ask the experts to unmute yourselves and switch on your cameras so that we can have a nice talk with each other.
Well,
Welcome back. There's already plenty of questions that I will give to you, and I'll try to find a good order for them. The first question is to all of you.
now this question relates to Accenture, but also to the perspective of my ability. Can you give me the percentage of applications from people with disabilities in the area of business administration? So, how many people with disabilities apply in the area of business administration? Can you give us your insight? No, I can make a start if you want, and have to admit that I cannot give you a precise figure there because this these figures they are located in recruiting directly, and I don't have these tracking numbers. But I think we have been working on this topic intensively over the past few years. Also, with our talent program, we provide more visibility to these topics, and this also enables us to better reach out to people with disabilities. So I am sure that we were able to increase the percentage, but I cannot give you a precise figure. But I don't know, perhaps you can tell us more about that, Katrin and Zaki. Recruiting and how many people with disabilities do apply, or people with chronic diseases. The gray numbers here, or there's a gigantic gray area here. And why, if, and how people express their needs for liberties or their disabilities, that is always their individual decision. So we cannot give you a best practice for that because there are different requirements in terms of accessibility. There are certain disabilities that are visible, that are not visible. Then there are certain disabilities or impairments that are of physical or of mental nature. So there is such a big diversity, and even when it comes to the same and to the same precise condition, that people will always be different. So you will have one person who will say, I will be very open about the fact that I have a vision impairment, and then there are other candidates who might say, I will first start the application process, but only once I know the managers, I will talk about my disabilities. Then there are other people who might say, no, I will wait up until the end of my trial period, because then I know that I have convinced everybody of my talent, of my qualifications and skill, and only then I will talk about this openly. The best strategy can work, but it doesn't have to work. So that is the thing here. So so you cannot say that this is the only strategy that will work, and you can't say that without strategy it doesn't work. So that is the thing here. So I couldn't give you a figure either. I have to be honest about that. I can't give you a figure either. My answer would have been just the same. Isn't it nice to get these questions and answers? I have another question here. It has already been answered in the background, but perhaps you would like to add. Wilhelm asked, some of my customers face the challenges that employees with disabilities do not disclose their disabilities. The organization implements many good measures in order to reach the topic of accessibility. It's a difficult topic. Do you have any recommendations on how to implement that? I think it's these very topics that we talked about today. Now, an inclusive corporate culture that needs to be actually implemented in real life. and that needs to entail all of the different dimensions from the very top to the very bottom. It has to be implemented, as said, in a hands-on manner everywhere. This is going to be the the foundation that enables people with disabilities to openly talk about it. And for those who don't want to talk about it at all, that is okay as well. There are certain people who would not like to talk about their personal lives. It doesn't even uh, have to be related to the disabilities. It can also be with other topics. You just have to accept that too, that they don't want to talk about that. But then we also need to say that many people with disabilities have already made very many bad experiences with different companies. This is why it is also completely understandable that they do want to keep this for themselves at first, because they want to see first whether everything that the company said beforehand is actually also implemented in real life. So if you say that you are inclusive, if you say you are an inclusive company, you also have to follow suit to your word. So you also have to actually implement it. I can only add, if there is a good cooperation, and if if only the question remains whether or not the disability is disclosed or not, then you don't have to do any further steps on there. But if there are more concerns, for example, that people don't dare to disclose their disabilities and the cooperation within the company on these topics does not work, then that is a concern. And perhaps in a conversation with an employee, you could directly ask whether there is something that they could individually do for the person in order to improve something, and tell them and make sure that they know that that your that the company is in this with them together, so to get their input as well. Because if we don't have these conversations, we will reach what we don't want, and we will stop talking about disabilities in the first place. Then there is another question that is linked to that. I'm going to ask it to Katharina, because you mentioned role models, ambassadors, and so on and so forth. There was an anonymous question. We do not ask employees about their disabilities, so this type of role modeling and showing ambassadors is difficult. What is your advice? What have you done at Accenture, and what is your experience that you made there? I don't think that you have to be involved there yourself. Perhaps you have someone in your family who is affected by these topics, or some of your friends might have made these experiences. So we always approach that in a voluntary manner. But perhaps there is one topic that might be of greater importance, and a topic that you would like to gain more knowledge and insights about. So I do think it is important to get this contribution by a person with disabilities. And if you don't ask that, you can perhaps also get cooperations and partnerships with others externally. So if you don't have these resources inside your company, you might find these resources externally. So I do think it's important that you just show that you are ready, that you are open to that, that you are dedicated on these topics. And if you don't have these resources inside, you can also look outside. Perfect. So your advice is to look a bit outside of the box, so you can also help yourself by looking for help elsewhere. I have another question again for you, Katharina, and this is a question on the financial advantage of integrating employer branding in your strategy. And the question by Florian Lorenz is, how do you deal with the economic crisis? If there is a hiring stop, how can you deal with the economic crisis in an inclusive manner? But perhaps let's ask this question to Katharina first, then to the two other experts. I think this is again a question that relates to values and culture. Now, we are committed to create an inclusive work environment. And we would like to give everybody the room to develop. And this isn't something that can just change all of a sudden. So this is also going to be part of our nature during an economic crisis, as it is part of our nature during every other state of the economy. Yes, there might be some external things that change, but our culture is important to us. It is a value that we stand up for, that we live up to, and this is a value that won't be changed in a considerable manner. This is something that we are committed to. But please also share your insights and your estimates, Katrin and Zaki. I'm going to start. Now, let me compare that to 100% of accessibility. These 100%, they only exist on paper, only in theory, because the needs of one person might be the barriers for another person with a different diagnosis. So you cannot reach these 100% of accessibility of an event or a meeting. In real life, that is not possible. So you have to just make sure to be as accessible as possible when it comes to the building structure in a personal setting, in a virtual and remote setting even. And same goes when it comes to budgets, when it comes to economic crises, when it comes to austerity measures. So if all of these things happen, it doesn't mean that you would just completely get rid of all of your diversity engagements, because diversity is something that has to do with values. It has to do with measures that you implement, but it has more to do with the sense of being together, with collaboration that strives for accessibility, as much accessibility as possible. And you will just implement that with the budget that is available to you. Now, would just like to say that I agree with everything that Katharina and Zaki said. Employer branding isn't just there in order to get new talents, new employees. This also has to do with something, with questions like, what do we do as a company? So yes, even if there is a hiring stop for a short while, internally I can still work on all of these things. And my employer brand isn't going to disappear just because I will have to decrease my recruiting measures for a year. Now, in the chat, I just saw something, a good statement, a very clear statement. It's not a question, but I think you can still give an answer to this statement. So if the values are correct, you don't have uh, to display them everywhere, because if you have your values right, why don't you have to excessively talk about that again and again? I can just say that I agree completely with what this statement says. If everything works well, this excessive communication will decrease. And yes, a lot that has to do with diversity is invisible. Katharina, something else that I would like to say. If you are already inclusive, you don't have to talk about being inclusive that much anymore. I just think that it's important that you know what you stand for, what your mission is, what you, as a company, what values you represent, and how you communicate all of that to the outside world. We know that Gen Z is looking for jobs, and we also know that they don't file hundreds of applications and then just take the first the first one that gets accepted. No, they are very careful in choosing and picking and choosing the right company. So it has to be important that all of the values that you stand for are communicated in a transparent manner. Now, perhaps the goal is that diversity, equity, and inclusion don't play such a huge role anymore because they are part of every other values as well. This means that I will reach a situation where I don't have to specifically highlight that anymore. But I do think that it is important to make sure that this reflects in the corporate values, and it's also fun to do that. And that's something else that I could add here. Obviously, we also need to think of the employees that are going to represent these values. So even though if I don't have any communication activities elsewhere, I do have my employees as communicators that are going to carry these values to the outside, and they will also be a resource of hiring new talent. And it's also fun, you said. It's also fun with you. We're only left with the last 15 minutes, and now I would like to continue with a few very hands-on questions. So, for example, you do make a decision that you would like to communicate something with your employer brand, and we have a few questions regarding that. Let me make a start with Sarah Knobelsdorff's question. What type of content could we produce if we do not have any best practice stories about people with disabilities yet? So what are the options regarding the content? And I think this would be a perfect question for you, or would all like to answer. Could you again reformulate that? Could you say what you mean with content possibilities? There is always content. That is my first reaction to that. But if you don't have any best practice stories yet, how can you find something to make the first step? I think that's the meaning and the intention behind this question. I think I would also listen what people internally said. I can also just work on this topic. That can already be a best practice. For example, choosing inclusive language. For example, when it comes to visuals that I use, I can also turn it into a topic. So even before having internal stories, testimonials, best practices, just start with the basics, and then all of these things they will come to me. Because if I start to talk about that as a company, and then if I say that my goal is to produce this content, then I think people will resonate with your strategy, and they will reach out to you. This is something that we do as well. We ask our colleagues whether there are employees who would like to join us, who would like to contribute. So you have to listen to your team, but you also have to communicate that you are working on this topic, because there might be people who do not know yet that you are actually active in this area. And then they could set targets. You could also set yourself smaller targets, or offering a training. How can I set up accessible web pages, for example? This is going to resonate with a certain target group, and then step by step, you will create the good networks and the good content. So perhaps the first step is difficult, but the more you talk about it, the better your network gets, and the better help you will get.
Thank you. There's always content. So also in terms of the topic content, there's also a longer question, which I think is also towards Tini and Saki, which says that the spot by McDonald's is great, but only makes sense if it's a job where there's actually accessibility. This could be difficult, for example, if a new employee is supposed to be taught in sign language. Do you have experience or advice on this? Maybe if you think about the talent project, or are there federally funded trainings about sign language for other employees? What do you think about this? I think by now you can get a lot from the social ministry and their service, or I want to agree with the person who asked this question. because if we are communicating something, and for example, we don't have any best practice yet to have a spot, advertisement spot like McDonald's, for example, it's courageous because it means that you also have to show this space that you are showing in this video. You have to actually have it. So there are organizations or financial aids that you can get to have assistance. I can't tell you anything specifically, but this exists a lot, especially in Austria and Germany. And the rest is trying it in a testimonial. How would it work? Or you ask experts who will have a look and say, okay, can I work in this setting? So you don't instantly, um, I don't have to instantly start with, okay, instantly we will create a job, but you can also do an accessibility check and see actually how realistic is it actually for us that we can implement accessibility and create a job for a person with a disability. And if not, how long will it take to change this? What do we need for this? So this is the information that will go into the funnel. How can we carry on in the next steps? I think if I can add something here from our experience, in the beginning, we were also trying to do everything as perfectly as possible before someone already or and before someone arrives. And our learning was that that doesn't work because, as Saki and Tini said before, everyone has very individual needs, and I can't already know this ahead of time. And maybe I'll think a lot about things that end up not being necessary. So yes, you need a certain frame, and yes, you also need the mindset and the support to change things and adapt things. But the best thing is to just go for it and show courage, and take this first step where not everything has to be perfect. Um, and then you will have a look, okay, what do we actually need? And what are the needs? What do I need to buy to be able to create the accessible environment where the person feels at home and likes to work as well? So that was something for me personally that was difficult because I wanted to prepare everything personally, but that was not possible. So you have to keep in mind and have some trust that if you have the right partners, you will be able to go through this process without having everything perfectly prepared. Thank you, because Saki, you're talking, there's a question now as well, which is about invisible disabilities and how can I think about them in employer branding, because not everyone who has a disability is using wheelchairs. So what can we do in this point? Actually, you're talking about something that we recently talked about in My Ability, where we created our own stock photos. And I personally said already for a few years already, I have been working in inclusion, but I myself actually have a chronic illness that is invisible. So I also said, okay, I'll sign up, I'll do a picture, a stock photo, but it's not visible. It doesn't increase visibility to have me in the picture. Of course, I could go there and say, hi, I'm coming here and I have my chronic disease, but um, there's many different ways you can do this as well. A lot of the time, I talk about how my workplace needs to be, or how the values that I live, um, who can also be in parallel with the company that I am. How does this support in reaching my goals? So, to say it simply, a LinkedIn post. A LinkedIn post that an employee is posting on their career, because of course they're trying to further their personal career and their social media, but at the same time they also work in a famous company. So if I go and disclose something and post something um, about how I personally deal with mistakes, or how I used to do it differently, Um, if I say thanks to working in home office, I can not only work around my chronic illness, but I'm also so much less stressed out about having to hide this from my employer. And to create this trust where you can say, I have a bad day today, I can just do home office. And then the employer just says, okay, you know what you're doing. We'll see you at a certain time, whatever. That creates a lot of trust. And to show personal stories like this and connect it with company values will reach so many people. It reaches so many different channels that a person who just works in a company in a position that can be high or low, doesn't matter, can reach people with or without disabilities and can reach different companies and also your own colleagues. I hope that answers the question well. This always reminds me a little bit of our team picture, which we show in our recruiting workshops, the whole team of My Ability. And there's two people who use wheelchairs on there, and a blind colleague who has a tactile stick. So three people with visible disabilities. And then we show the picture and we ask people, what do you think? How many people on this picture have a disability? And then most people are really astonished to hear that it's about half of the people who have a disability. Because, of course, you can see the person who use wheelchairs or the person who use a cane, but um, it looks as if only three people have a disability, but in reality, we were 40 people and 20 out of those had a disability. But that is the picture of our team, and even if it looks as if only three people have a disability, this is our team. This is who we are, and I think that's how you should deal with this as a company, and just be like, this is our team, and this is how it looks. Yes, some people have disability, people have different backgrounds, different genders, but all these dimensions. Um, so if I take a picture of every single team, in two of them, maybe you'll have people with a visible disability, but in other five pictures, there might not be no one. But that's how the team is. That's that's authenticity. That's beautiful. This is what we are. These are our values. No matter what happens, be it economic difficulties or Um, as we had a question in the chat, the topic is important, but globally, we also see in the US, we're also seeing they're sending different messages. It's also about this. It's about the values they have, the team that you have, how you further act with this, no matter whatever is happening. There's always the possibility, if this is grounded in your values, you can keep these principles within your values. So unfortunately, I have to look at the time. So I'm trying to bridge the gap towards the last question, which will be a nice ending. The question is the following. We would like to communicate our diversity and inclusion efforts in an authentic and credible manner. So we talked about tokenism, and we do not want to be seen as pink washers, so people who only pretend they're doing something. So, how inclusive do you have to be in order to communicate it with scale? And to be able to communicate this in a colorful way, as you said, Saki. So, what are your final thoughts on this? I'll try to break it down and I'll ask a question back. If a company does a lot to show inclusion, or tries to do a lot of purple pink washing, and does this on a large scale, is that not the attempt to try and be inclusive? So we were talking about tokenism before. If you do something once and then say, oh, now we're inclusive, you will feel yourselves as an employer as well. That's not how it works. But as long as you have the will and the commitment to keep cooperating, and you're interested in a topic, and you also have fun about about this journey, which can be a bumpy ride. It can go up and down. Things can go right or wrong. Sometimes it works well, sometimes less. So it's an exciting journey. But as long as you're on this journey, it's just a matter of time until you can be loud about inclusion. I think at the moment, more than ever, we should altogether be very loud. Catherine, do you want to add something? Okay, we'll have to end this meeting, but I think we need a good basis. It's important to strengthen the core, to be able to shine outwards, but be courageous to take first steps. Um, to not let anything stop you. Use your network, use your experiences that we have here and outside of it. I think you can uh, create worries that you might have and look into the future. Thank you. Those are great words to avoid tokenism as well, which was also added just to explain. Tokenism is, for example, if you always show this one person who uses a wheelchair, even if the whole team is not inclusive. So if you just use one example, that doesn't actually represent. That's what tokenism is. Katrin and Saki talked about this. So let's be together, let's be loud, let's be colorful, let's work on the both on the outside and the inside, and uh, let's be loud and authentic employer branding. So I'd like to really thank all three of you for being here today and for your diverse inputs, your different learnings and insights that you were able to give us. I'd like to thank all of you who listened for all your questions, for being here for the whole time. I'd like to thank the interpreters in the background and my colleagues from My Ability who were answering questions and working in the chat. I'm really looking forward to the next time. Looking forward to seeing you personally again. And I'd love to wish all of you a wonderful evening and see you very soon.